welcome to Books in the World. I'm your host, Roger Smith. Books in the World is an interview show produced by the Cape Cod Writers Center and the Cape Media Center. The Writers Center was established over 6 decades ago and sponsors a 4-day writers conference every summer on Cape Cod. The goal of Books in the World is to show how writers, illustrators, publishers, editors, and others in the literary field play their roles in the world of books and other communication media. This show has been broadcast continuously since 1978, making it the longest running program of its kind in the United States. Today, we are delighted to welcome Martha Hall Kelly, author of the Martha's Vineyard Beach and Book Club. New York Times bestselling author Martha Hall Kelly is beloved by fans all over the world for her immersive novels that transport readers to the past. Ever since her debut with Lilac Girls, which one critic praised as falling squarely into the groundbreaking category of fiction that re-examines history from a fresh female point of view, Kelly has portrayed brave and determined women against real-life, meticulously researched historical backgrounds. Her fifth book, The Martha's Vineyard Beach and Book Club, which I was pleased to read in advance of its publication, is her most personal work to date, as she based the narrative on many aspects of her mother's heritage. The novel discloses the true little-known history of what took place on the island of Martha's Vineyard during the war, that German U-boats were cruising the surrounding waters and Nazi spies were sneaking ashore. At the novel's center are two sisters, Briar and Cadence, compelling characters who find themselves more actors than observers as historical forces bear down on their home. Bearing in mind that I'm speaking to you from Cape Cod, Martha, where the term beach reads has a very literal connotation, I was extremely pleased to get a beach read, but oh so much more. This book is compelling, the characters are relatable, believable, and as a former history teacher and current writer of historical fiction, I was very gratified to go down the historical rabbit hole. I learned a lot of history with this book. Martha Hall Kelly, welcome to Books and the World.
Wow. Thank you so much for having me. That was an amazing summary. Thank you.
Well, it was fun to get to know you through some of your written bio work, but now I'm seeing you in 2 dimensions. Maybe sometime I'll see you in 3 dimensions. But let's get started here. I got so many questions to ask, and I know we're just going to run out of time, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time with fluff. So, okay, let's get started with the two stars of this novel, the sisters, Briar and Cadence. Tell us about them and tell us about the real life people who inspired them.
Well, Cadence and Briar. Cadence is based on my mother. And my mom, her family, the Smiths, came to Martha's Vineyard and settled there in 1891. And so my great grandfather built a flower farm. The house is still there on State Road, which is really fun. But so she grew up there during World War II, and she used to tell us all the time stories about the soldiers at Beacon Hill and the U-boats and all amazing stories. So I thought, well, why not base one of the sisters on my mother? My mother always, although she loved Martha's Vineyard, wanted to get off of the island. She wanted to see the world. She was a big reader, and as much as she loved it, she always wanted to leave, which I thought was kind of an interesting thing for a character. And Cadence is the one that starts the book club on the island, and so it fits with my mother. And she had a book club, and all these friends. One of them is still with us, and she helped me a lot. Her name is Shirley Kennedy. She won't tell me how old she is because she said then people think you're old. But anyway, she's fabulous, and thank God she helped me. And Briar, the other sister, is purely from my imagination. In a way, my father kind of inspired Briar. Briar is 16. She's really a genius. Not that my dad was a genius, but he loved finding things, and he was always looking on the island for sea glass. And he had one of those like Geiger counter things, that you look on the beach with. he loved finding things, and she's the same way. I gave her my dad's, love of finding things. And the two sisters, they don't always get along, but they have an interesting character arc throughout the novel. And Briar, I can't say too much because it's a spoiler, but she's very interested in Nazi memorabilia, and she may meet one in the flesh.
Maybe she does, but we're not telling.
Yes, maybe.
The This is great. Now, not once again, not a spoiler alert, but the book actually starts out in 2016 with Mari or
Mari, yeah.
Mari. Great. Another character who, like Briar and Caden, speaks directly to the reader in the first person. And
Hmm.
this was first of all, tell us a little bit about Mari, but also as an author, I was very interesting. You gave every character, each of the characters, first person view of things. They're telling you the reader directly. And that's, to me, that is fascinating. I just like to know about Mari and about why you went first person rather than third person, or any other way you could possibly have gone.
That is such a great question and only could be asked by a fellow writer. So thank you. Mari is a 30-something woman who, after her mother dies, she goes through her effects and finds the address of a famous painter named Elizabeth Devereux that lives on Martha's Vineyard in this beautiful oceanside farm estate. And under the guise of taking a painting class, she arrives on the vineyard and confronts Elizabeth Devereux and says, "How do you know my mother? My mother never left California." Um, and Mrs. Devereux says, "Well, you're wrong about that. And you need to sit down and I need to tell you the story of the two Smith sisters." And so she tells Mari, that's the whole book, is she's telling Mari the story of these two sisters and how Mari is perhaps related to their situation. So it's a little bit of a mystery in that way. And we keep coming back at intervals in the book to Mari, which is kind of fun. Already people are reaching out to me who are coming out to the Vineyard this summer, book clubs, like groups of them who want to read the book while they're there and go to places. So it's nice to have the Mari helping the economy of the island. And so it's really fun I have a map of all the places that Mari goes in real time. But anyway, but your second half of that question about why I wrote it in first person, I've written every bit. This is my sixth book. Oh, wait, fifth book? I've lost track. But thank you. I've always written in first person, but this book I thought, well, I'm kind of breaking out of what I usually write about, which and I wrote it, I didn't write it in first person. And my editor read it and said, "What is going on? Why don't I like this book?" And so I said, "You know what? It's the first time I haven't written in first person." She said, "Rewrite it in first person, please." And I did. And I knew right away that was, I kind of knew anyway that it should have been in first person.
Interesting.
Um, yeah. So, and when I did that, and I did it in like 3 months, it was pretty quick. Um, Already I felt the chapters. I loved, this is my favorite novel of anything I've written. And I knew that as I was rewriting it. Thank you. But it's funny how just, that point of view really does make a difference. I thought it would make it more writerly to maybe try a different point of view. And I learned the hard way that I should
You
stick with
failed.
I
You failed, and
failed.
your editor called you on it. That's a riot.
It was bad though. When she was like,
Oh my
"What's
goodness.
wrong?" And she had never done that before. So, but the good news is once I gave it to her in the current form, she loved it, loved it. Yeah. So,
Oh, that's great. Well, you actually, I've got a list of questions that's this long, but I'm going to skip down my list because you've alluded to something about the women, about the people who are contacting you and saying they want to read the book on Martha's Vineyard, which I've never done this during an interview before, but I'm really going to go for it. The British historical novelist Harry Sidebottom said, "The past is another country. They not only do things differently there, but they think about things different." Now, Sidebottom mostly writes about ancient Roman history, but I'd like to apply this wisdom to your book's setting, Martha's Vineyard, and the past, which is not that long ago. We're only talking about 80 years ago. So, is Martha's Vineyard in 1942 a different country? How are people thinking differently, or how is it the same? How have you recreated this place? Because here's all these people going to Martha's Vineyard. They're going to be reading your book and they're going to recognize some things, but not others. So take it.
Wow, that is a fabulous question. First of all, side bottom, what a name. Love that.
Isn't that a wonderful name?
I know. Well, yes, the answer is yes, yes, yes. I feel like, I mean, I wasn't alive in 1942, but everything that I have found out through research and through, my current primary sources, like Shirley Kennedy, who's still alive
Mhm.
and lived through that time, and from my mother's stories, it was a really different time. And I remember I've been going there for 68 years, so it just summers. And I
Mhm.
remember when I was a kid, so that would be like early 60s.
Mhm.
And already it's so much different than what I remember as a kid. So all I did was go back another maybe 20 years
Mhm.
and kind of expand on that. But I think it was definitely, definitely a different kind of place, mostly because the war. This is part of the reason why I wanted to write this book, is because I feel like we're so divided as a country. And that was a time when we were all together. And, except for a few isolationists and, Charles
Couple
Lindbergh, for
Nazis
example,
here and there.
for a couple of Nazis, yes, we were all on, rowing with the same oar. And I really
Mhm.
wanted to go back to that time
Mhm.
when we were all together and singing from the same playbook, or from the same choir
Mhm.
hymnal.
Sure.
And I feel like a lot of things, like my own Smith family heritage, like they didn't have electricity. They do in the book, but a lot of places up island didn't have electricity. It was just a whole, what they ate was so different.
Yes.
Um, and they had to walk into Vineyard Haven, which, that was like an all-day walk. So they foraged for a lot of their food. It was just a different, way simpler, of course, type of time. And my grandmother, my mom used to talk about how when my grandfather died young, he left her with four children, and she took laundry. And it was just after the Depression, and she made donuts and sold them at the side of the road for 25 cents a dozen. And so, I've always known that. That's like part of our family lore.
Sure.
But when you think
Mhm.
about the fact that how could she get by selling a dozen donuts for 25 cents? I mean, it was just a different time. And now, they're like getting rid of pennies. So it's like, I feel like that was the best part of the book, writing the book. Not only reconnecting with my own family, but going back to that really beautiful, simple time on the island.
Lovely. Terrific. All right. Well, once again, I've got to inject some of my own biases into this, because the historical tidbits, they're like little Easter eggs that I don't expect to find. And then all of a sudden, here they are. And I'm going to run through a list of four of them,
Oh, wow.
because although I used to teach history, I didn't know this, but of course they were there. German submarines off the coast. Now tell me, where did you pull that from?
Oh, yeah.
Was it common knowledge, not, or where did that come from?
I think it was common knowledge. I mean, I only knew it because my mother used to talk about. Later, they moved to Vineyard Haven, and she said she would lay awake at night sometimes and hear the batteries recharging, because the subs, the U-boats, would have to come up to the surface,
Sure. Mhm.
recharge their batteries. And so I've known since I was little that that was happening. And then once I dug into it, um, I learned that they were all up and down the Eastern Seaboard. I mean, they were taking down ships, merchant ships and liberty ships I mean, every day. At one point during the war, so many ships were sunk, and they were just waiting for them because they would come from Boston down to New York and but not just here, everywhere. And that's why it was so important to keep the lights off because you could see the ships silhouetted by the lights on the shore, and they were
Of
just taking
course.
down ships left and right until a little bit later in the war when their technology advanced. But it was really
Convoys.
good. Yeah, especially for the merchant marine.
Hmm.
Um, because those guys were dying, in record numbers. So
Hmm.
that was fascinating when I was writing the book. And uh, and yeah, I mean that I don't know if it was common knowledge if everyone knew it, but also Shirley Kennedy referenced that as well. And my mom used to talk about the Nazis came off of submarines and came
Yeah.
on and had
Hmm.
dinner at the Beach Plum Inn, and it. I think a big part of why it wasn't more well known on the island is because the Chamber of Commerce had a whole campaign to say, and I found one in the newspaper. It was so funny. Nothing to see here. Nothing there. Of course, there are no Nazi subs. None of that is true. And it was just like, okay, and then it was like Chamber
Oh
of
my
Commerce.
goodness.
They didn't want people not coming out.
Tell me, this is just great stuff. Tell me about recognition models that were
Uh,
that Breyer was helping to make and able to help, I guess, the home guard or maybe military folks identify the bad guys.
Both, actually. Yes. I thought those recognition models were so interesting. All across the country, model shops started making recognition models, uh, not only for the military, but for people that were on watch. Like out of Martha's Vineyard, they had watches to see if, Nazi planes were coming over. So they started making recognition models, and they're
These are worth
highly
both boats and planes as well.
Yes, yes, Japanese and German. I think some Italian too, but they were now, of course, they're incredibly collectible. But I thought, you know what? I love the Van Ripers and I love that, the whole idea of a model shop, and that's where Briar, the younger sister, that's where she works, and she kind of gets in trouble there a little bit.
He does just a little bit.
Yeah,
Okay, I'm going to keep going down the cool stuff here.
I love it.
American troops practicing amphibious landings on the beaches of Martha's Vineyard. Really? They did
Oh,
that?
yes, yes, yes,
Oh
yes.
my gosh, that's
I know.
wonderful.
I know. It's crazy. That was well known on the island as well. It wasn't supposed to be, like no one was supposed to talk about it. And it
Hmm.
wasn't supposed to be in the newspaper. I think it was in the Gazette once but I was really lucky. I got to, I can't say who, but someone let me into their private archives
Oh my goodness.
of some amazing diary entries because what happened was um, the top brass came over, and the night before they stayed in private homes all along the northern shore of Martha's Vineyard, and some of the people that were hosting, I got to see their diaries and exactly what it was like to be on the ground when those mock invasions were happening. So that was really, really interesting. And there's a historian who writes wonderful books, Tom Dresser, who wrote a lovely man and wrote the history of Martha's Vineyard during World War II. And he talks about it as well. But basically, uh, they were practicing for Normandy, and I, which is sad. My mother always said when the convoys would stop at her house and get the donuts, and how handsome the boys were. She was only 14 at that time, but the Vineyard kind of adopted these boys that were from everywhere. They weren't
Sure.
just island kids. And what people didn't realize is these mock invasions were preparation for Normandy because the coastlines are similar in terms of, rockiness. And they were practicing with this, like, no one had ever seen them before, those invasion barges. And they a lot of those guys went to, they call them the Cape Cod Commandos. They went to um, Normandy, and about half of them didn't survive. So I think the island as a whole was just mourned their boys. But yeah, they did a full scale mock invasion with planes buzzing the beach. They had do they call them barrage balloons? The
Barrage
big,
balloons, yes.
yeah, and
Wow, that must have been quite a sight.
so cool. And the top
Mhm.
brass, it was like Lambert's Cove Beach and, Cedar Tree Neck, that whole area. And the top brass stood on the cliffs and watched. And they did an amazing job. They came out, they describe it, the invasion barges come out of like the mist, because it was in the early morning. And they thought that the guys like got lost or something, but they didn't. And they emerged out of the mist. They stormed the beach. And what they did was, I think it's so interesting. They had like flour bags that they would simulate like if a bomb was going off.
Yeah.
And so they had so-called Germans on the beach, and the guys were supposed to get past the Germans and make it to the new airport on Martha's Vineyard, and only then were they like winning the war, and they
Oh
did.
my goodness.
But people talk about in Vineyard Haven looking out the window in their garden and seeing like troops on their bellies going through, their gardens on their way to Edgartown to the airport. So it was pretty amazing time.
I can imagine. Okay, I got one more little historical factoid that you threw at us, which I just once again knew nothing about, and that's the armed service editions, the flimsy
Uh,
books that the troops could fit into their backpacks. Tell us about those.
I have to have a visual aid.
You've got one, don't you?
I have wait.
This is one of the advantages of conducting these things via Zoom.
I was so in love with these little guys,
Oh my
and
goodness.
it's a complete book. They're even smaller than like a paperback, but some of them are very pricey.
Wow.
So I just have the, inexpensive ones. But yeah, every soldier on the invasion barges at Normandy carried one of these books, which I find so, so incredibly moving.
Fascinating.
While Nazis were burning books, they printed over 1 million of these for the guys. And some books, like The Great Gatsby, it wasn't a hit until those boys came back from war, and they loved Gatsby, and they made Great Gatsby a classic. So they were reading like crazy, even guys that had never read before.
Sure.
There's great pictures of them like in the trenches reading.
It's great.
And
Now,
in the book,
okay, let's get to a more unpleasant part of American history, and that's the pro-German community of I don't even know if I'm pronouncing it properly. Yaf Yank on Long Island. Tell us about that.
yeah, I
That one
always thought,
has
yeah,
certainly been shoved under the carpet.
yeah. Actually, I tried to talk about this on social media, but they don't let you say a lot of the words that I would need to say, and or they're
Wow.
censored. Yeah, I mean, it's crazy that you can't talk about how bad the Nazis were, but you can't even say that word. But anyway, yeah, Penguin Island. I've always been fascinated with it. It's still there. It's a community, and it was Nazi sympathizers, and they had streets named after Hitler and all of his ministers. Yeah, they had like Goebbels Road, and in the houses they've taken it out now, but like under the eaves they would have like a swastika uh, done in bricks, for example. And yeah, it's still there. Those houses are still standing. They also had a summer camp for Nazi sympathizers. There were a lot of those. I was really surprised by that. There's one in Wisconsin, and I think Camp Reinhardt. So yeah, it was alive and well. You know, the Bund was thriving out on Long Island. Yeah.
Was pre-war or as the war was progressing, did they kind of dissipate, or did they kind of maintain their posture?
You know, that's a good question. I'm not 100% sure, but I think after Pearl Harbor, people got, yeah, they became more quiet about it. I don't think
Yeah.
they necessarily changed. Like, look at Henry Ford. He gave Hitler a birthday present all throughout the war. He didn't stop.
Amazing,
Birthday present.
amazing.
Crazy.
Okay, so once again, thank you so much for being here. Oh, how just one more self promotion. How do we get in touch with you? How do we
Wow.
find you?
I am on Instagram and sometimes Facebook, and I have a Substack as well, which is fabulous. I love Substack. So any of those places.
Excellent. Okay. Well, if you've enjoyed this video and would like to see more, you'll find links to them through our website, CapeCodWritersCenter.org, and through our Facebook page and on YouTube. Thank you very much for watching Books and the World. And Martha, thank you so much for joining us. This has been
Thanks for
delightful.
having me. Bye-bye.